have now.
Thank you, Bobby.
All right, good morning. We will call the January 6th, 2022 City Council meeting to order. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you today giving thanks. Thank you for allowing us to get here safely. Lord, I thank you for our council, our staff that dedicated to the city's business in this weather this morning. We ask you to watch over them, protect them as they're out working and serving the city. Lord, give us the wisdom to make decisions to best benefit all the citizens that we serve today. In your Son's name, amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Sandy, you can see that all council members present with the exception of Councilman Brooks. Invitation for public comment, any item under first reading, we'll have a public hearing for, so if you wish to speak in favor of or opposition to under that item, you can be recognized at that time. First reading, have a proposed budget amendment for the industrial land acquisition, the amount of $4,896,250. I'll call on Bobby and Jerry Spohr and Mandy White all come up here, and Bobby can talk about the budget amendment, and Jerry and Mandy can talk about why we're doing this today and the process so far.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll be brief from a budget amendment standpoint. It's rather straightforward. I would just remind the council that you previously approved a land purchase sale agreement that involved multiple steps. It involved the acquisition of the property that's going to be discussed this morning, and then the ultimate resale of that property. The number that we're putting in the budget amendment is $4,896,250. In working with Jerry and Mandy, we believe this to be an adequate number that to fund this, and that would include some costs related to closing. And what's proposed right now is that this would be funded from unencumbered fund balance, and we would expect when the sale portion of that agreement comes to fruition that we would be recouping these funds. So,
All right, so Jerry and Mandy.
Good morning.
Good
morning.
Welcome aboard, Ms. Skinner.
Thank you.
It may be best, I did some numbers last night that the last time we were here in November, I referred to some lawyer's calculations. If I may maybe run these up and let you just kind of glance at these numbers, they'll, I think, tell you the story
Can you pull that microphone over? That's not.
Okay,
yeah,
I'm
this
sorry.
one. Yeah, very good. It's a little confusing up there.
testing.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, good. I think those numbers, and that's Jerry's attempt at a spreadsheet. What that'll show you is where the city starts with land acquisition out at Highway 223 in this area. What its cost per acre is for that land. And then where it winds up with the Georgia Pacific transaction, what it collects in terms of the sales price on that transaction, and then what's left afterwards. So what that should show you is at the end of the day, after you've purchased property from the Freeman Trust, which is tentatively set for tomorrow morning, and after you acquire the acreage from the Tall Oak Farms Group, and after you sell it to Georgia Pacific, you should wind up with a little over $1 million in cash and 101 acres that is going to have a price, if it's at its cost basis, $25,000. If it's at what Georgia Pacific's cost, it's a $40,000 an acre. I understand that the chamber has it listed for somewhat north of that figure. So And on top of that, you have an industrial occupant there who's employing people, and eventually will be paying property taxes both on the real estate and the personal property once the incentives through the Industrial Development Board have concluded. So I'm not totally clear on the City of Jackson's budget amendment process, but I understand there's a two-meeting requirement. I know enough to know, based on my experience as a municipal lawyer at other towns, that that's to give the public an opportunity to comment and be involved in that opportunity. So my understanding is you had a first reading on the Freeman property earlier in the week through a misunderstanding, miscommunication between Mr. Arnold and me. The Tall Oak Farm ones didn't make it on that. That's why it's here, I believe, on a first reading today. So that being said, I'll be happy to entertain any specific questions that you may have or discuss anything that I may have missed in my comments.
Mr. Chairman. Bobby, just kind of recapping some of the conversations that we had about the net proceeds from this. I believe we also have some debt service from some other property that we need to take into account in this.
We do, and we have talked about this previously, so I'm not sure, several years ago, 15, 16, somewhere along in there, the city issued a capital outlay note to acquire what I believe to be the original 115 acres of the Tall Oaks property. And we financed that, as I mentioned, with a capital outlay note. We've been servicing that debt as required since then. That debt service runs, I'm not sure, frankly, a few more years. But I did look at that, and should we service that capital outlay note till it's retired as it sits right now, there's a total of about, round numbers, about $500,000 worth of interest that would have been paid on that note from its inception to the point that it's retired, so.
And so I think the number we had looked at as net proceeds was somewhere in the $250,000 to $300,000
It's
range.
rounding numbers, that's correct.
Okay.
Councilman,
Yes.
that is, just to clarify, that is before we sell parcel B.
That's right. So if all this happens, the Project Cardinal continues through. The land is purchased by the industrial client. We would net $250,000 to $300,000 and have 100+ acres free and clear.
Correct.
Okay. And you're marketing the 100+ acres at what per acre?
We currently have it listed at 60,000 an acre.
Okay.
All right, any questions before I open the public hearing? All right, this is an item on first reading, so I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of or opposition to can be recognized. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing.
Move to approve.
Have a motion?
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion from council?
Mayor, as far as the process is concerned, we've had a lot of special call meetings on this. We expecting to have another one tomorrow.
Not tomorrow. We have to give time to call the meeting. I think we're working on the schedule of the close for the other property. And so once we nail down that date firmly, which I think is the 11th or 12th, so maybe Tuesday morning, we're looking possibly another call meeting to wrap this up.
Mayor, if I could, just as a point of clarification, looking to the future, should all of this happen as it's been discussed and planned, and we fully expect that to be the case, there would be one additional budget amendment, and that would be a budget amendment to recognize the sale proceeds from the sale. So that would be forthcoming,
After the sale happens.
at that point.
One final comment, just to make the council aware of the current unrestricted fund balance. If this was to pass, we started the year at $21,700,000, and we would be at $9,800,000 and some change after the expenditures that have happened this year. So I'd just like everybody to be aware of that.
And we'll be back up to roughly, what, 16 million With the sale of
If, with the
property?
sale, yeah, back up to 16.
16, 17.
And that does not reflect any positive growth in other revenue areas as well. That should be noted. Because we have seen growth in both sales tax, hotel motel tax, and our property tax over what was budgeted. Current trends, at least.
All right, so any additional questions or discussions? If not, council, please vote.
Motion passed 8-0.
All right. And we move on to the next item. Second reading is proposed budget amendments for industrial land acquisition, the amount of $765,186.
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion or questions from council? All right, if not, council, please vote.
Motion passed 8-0.
All right. Thank you both. The next item is proposed budget amendment for the American Rescue Plan Act appropriations in the amount of $6,946,725. This item was approved on first reading. Bob, you want to discuss?
Yeah, just maybe to offer the council and the public kind of some summary comments to kind of get our bases on kind of where we are on all of this. At the meeting, everybody understands we've already received these funds. We actually received these funds in the last fiscal year, right? So that money's in the bank, and it's been reserved because it can only be spent per the ARPA regs. On Tuesday, you approved the actual spend resolution in, I think, what, were there 5 broad categories? That budget amendment, the budget amendment, so that was the spend resolution. The budget amendment that you're considering today, what this does is actually appropriates the money into those five broad spend categories. There are projects or proposed projects associated with those 5 broad categories that total up to the amount that's in each category. And that would be the point of accountability, if you will, from a budget standpoint, would be those totals in those 5 categories. For the benefit of the council and the public, the plan is that the American Rescue Plan funds would be moving forward would be accounted for in a separate fund, a fund of itself. So not in the general fund, not in the capital outlay fund. It would be a fund for that specific purpose. The plan also is that each project that is proposed would have a separate general ledger account number assigned to each project. So nothing will be, you won't have one account with multiple projects, and it can get confusing to see exactly what each project is costing. There's some pretty rigid reporting requirements associated with these funds. So having each project in one account will facilitate the reporting that the city will have to do to the Department of Treasury on how the funds are spent. It would be my understanding that all of the city's normal existing approval processes, and what I mean by that would be, where a purchase order is required and where bids or quotes are required. Contracts, if there's a contract associated with one or more of these projects, all of the existing approval processes that exist today in the city would apply to these projects, as well. That's sort of how it would work.
Just to make sure, Bobby, I understand.
Okay.
All the money will be in one account. However, each item will have its own line number, so when you disperse something, you will be able to track exactly how much and where and all that.
That's correct. All the money will be in one fund. It won't
Correct.
be commingled with general fund or capital outlay funds. It'll have a fund by itself, and then each project will have a separate account.
Okay.
So will we approve each and every line item?
No, it would be based on the contracts and the purchases that we have
So-
in there. So if there's a contract to be made, I mean, everything that has a purchase order contract, there's tracking. So most everything on there requires a contract to be done. That has to go through the normal bid process and approval process.
If we could, Mr. Chairman, talk about that a little bit. So if you look at the charter, section 20, it's the council's responsibility to make or authorize the making of these contracts. So with each contract would need to be, the potential for each contract would need to be brought to the council to be authorized. I don't think we've been doing that correctly.
We can get our attorney to look at that and see how we do that correctly.
Mr. Cobb, could you speak to that? I'm happy to pull that up so we can figure that out right now.
I would rather have time to read it, think about it before taking the pop quiz. I'll be glad to meet with you later today or tomorrow.
All right.
But I think generally the process is contracts, particularly above a certain threshold of $10,000 are brought to council for review and approval.
For approval, but not for the creation of, which the charter explicitly states.
Well, I think the context of creation of the contract is a contract is created not when somebody types it or proposes it, but when the parties create a contract which is a binding agreement and that it's signed by both sides. So the creation of the contract, in my opinion, would be when someone responds to an RFP, for example, and says, we'll do this to pick up the garbage, and the city then says, yes, we agree to that contract. That's when, in my opinion, the contract was created. Like I said, I've had 30 seconds to think about it, and I could be, what I usually like to do is to find out what somebody else whose name begins with judge says about it.
Sure,
And get some precedent for it. But,
sure.
And there's a contract lawyer sitting in front of me I'm gonna talk to when we leave. But that's what I think, creation of the contract is not the drafting, not the negotiations, but when it is binding, and it is that ability to bind the city and the city taxpayers to make payments, that's the creation of the contract.
So the language is the council shall make or authorize the making of, specifically. And the issue is that we continue to have contracts laid before us cold, sometimes hours before a meeting, where we really don't, as a council, don't really know what's in the contract sometimes. Now, it's up to us to figure that out, but on short notice, or where this has come from, the process this has happened. So I think we really, as a city, have to start looking at that process about how we're generating these RFPs, have some discussion about this. For example, the industrial land acquisition, I asked about that on Tuesday, and it was like, it's coming later, and now we made a decision on $5 million today. And so there's just got to be some organization to this, and I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but when we talk about these American Rescue dollars, we do have immediate needs right now, clearly in our IT department and public health and safety. But, as far as the TDEC stuff, I've been advocating for that. We're not going to be able to leverage these dollars. We have $200,000 available right now to leverage for TDEC grants. And the other
Councilman,
portion of that.
You're wrong. We've already talked about this several times, and we talked about this is a plan that can be amended. We kept it in there as placeholders. The city engineer also said that one of those projects wasn't even a need. So we're going off of what a plan is that can be amended, that can be flexible. This was the whole purpose of the committee that you served on, to be flexible in the plan, that we can amend and bring it back to council to be flexible. So it doesn't mean that everything is finalized. This is the plan, preliminary plan, which you stressed when you made the resolution for preliminary plan.
Exactly.
So that we can amend and move forward and be flexible.
Exactly. So if it's a preliminary plan, how do we finalize the plan? And so what I'm hearing from Mr. Arnold is that some of these things we won't have authority over finalizing.
Yes, you will.
So each item will be brought before us. That's the question I have. Will each item be brought before us to finalize?
No, not each item, but the big ticket items by the charter and the law says will be there. Anything over $10,000 you are to finalize.
So in this, excuse me, Mr. Pretty, in the committee meetings, it was stressed over and over again that we did not, there were certain items that we did not have confidence on being, because of this, the language is so vague at this point, we did not have confidence if this would meet the,
Right, and we'll
the
bring the
qualifications.
resolution, the spend plan will be brought to council every time we change something. No matter the size. The actual item will not be voted on, but the spend plan, if we change something inside the spend plan, which is itemized, everyone has a copy of it, any change inside the spend plan will be brought to council. The item won't be approved for purchase, but the spend plan will be amended. See what I'm saying?
yeah, but, okay, so as far as TDEC, should we expect to see a revision to the spend plan?
Yes,
Okay, and when would we expect to see that? Because that's coming here in the next month or two.
in the next month or two, you see an amendment to the spend plan.
I guess we'll have another special call meeting for that.
Well, we do what we need to do the people's business.
I have issue with the processes that we're going through. I think that, you know, I know that public health and safety and the lost revenue is kind of outside the purview of the qualifications. But, you know, to require, I think we should have some public input on some of this to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community.
Councilman, 7 months ago, when we started meeting about this, I wish you would have brought that up.
I did bring that up to you. I recall multiple conversations
You recall
asking for this.
communicating the big ticket spend plans. You didn't talk about anything else.
Yep.
You're changing.
Defining the large budgets, the large buckets is what I remember saying. And we need to have public input on this.
Mr. Bobby, the 5 categories that you have, that was basically mandated by the federal guidelines.
I'm sorry, which,
The 5 categories
the
that you have,
five categories.
that was something that was basically come from the
Yeah,
federal.
Yes, it's not the exact language, but generally speaking, these are the categories that are outlined in the interim rules for the ARPA.
The way we can spend the money. It's more so how we can,
Right, there are, as has been pointed out, there's a series of specific projects that roll up and total for each one of these major categories. And as Mary Conger has alluded, and I said in my opening comments, the way this budget amendment is proposed anyway, would be the level of accountability at which the city would be held. In other words, you know, the money that you see in each one of these categories, we would not be able to exceed that amount. It's not project.
Categorically.
Categorically, that's correct.
So I guess to my question is, for example, the Parks and Rec issues, or the Parks and Rec items that we have identified. I think there's some question on those being in qualified census tracts. We don't really have a clear idea on that. My question remains, what is the process for us to review the narratives? And as a council, it's our responsibility to ensure that these dollars are spent correctly. If they aren't, in 2026, 27, we're going to be paying them back.
That's correct. So we have the opportunity, matter of fact, I think as Lauren has described in some of our comments previously, we've developed, actually we're using a template that's been developed by the state of Tennessee to provide all the pertinent detail about each project and the justification for such project. And I believe it was discussed on Tuesday that you as a council member, you'd be provided those justifications for each one of those projects. You know, if we elect to do so, there's actually a process with the state. It's referred to as a spend plan review that we can go through if we choose to. It's not mandatory at all, and it's not a definite approval or non-approval. That authority doesn't rest with the state, it rests with the Department of Treasury. But what it is a review, which the way I like to think about it is kind of like a red light, green light, yellow light kind of review and their opinion about the justification for a project. And again, that's not mandatory. We're developing the forms if we choose to do that. And the forms will be available and reviewed internally, but we do have that option with the state if we elect to do that, but it's not mandatory.
Is there a reason we wouldn't do that, or why we're not pursuing that currently?
I don't know that we're not considering doing it or that we've decided not to do it. I'm just not clear whether we've decided definitely or not. And the only reason that I can think of might possibly be time considerations. As has been pointed out, some of these projects are very time sensitive. Some of the projects are very clearly, most of the projects, are very clearly justified and qualified, and there's no guarantee, there's no timeline that I've seen yet on turnaround time from the state to give you feedback. That might be a reason not to do it.
Well, Chairman, just to echo some of the sentiments that have been already spoken, I think there are the immediate needs, and we've got to deal with that. But in terms of the responsibility that comes back to us, there's been some confusion on what will come before us, what won't. And to the community involvement, I'm sure some of you've gotten emails or texts, as I have, of people wanting to know what their funds are being spent on. And it's hard to sit here as a council member and just push that through without, as the community is speaking up. So I would, if there's a way for us to continue to meet those needs that need to be met right away, but also not delay indefinitely, but to involve the community in this, I think that's something we should do.
This is not a final act, council. This is just to approve the appropriations to be able to spend the emergent needs and then come back to work toward a final plan.
Sure.
As has been discussed multiple times.
And I get that. I guess the question then is, if we approve this, does the money start getting spent right away? And I think when we asked the clarification of, does it come back to us?
Yes.
The only thing that's been said is if it's a contract.
No, I said everything comes back. The narratives come back. Bobby just told you the narratives come back.
Prior to expenditure?
Yes.
So I would move to have every expense to be qualified to the council and approved prior to purchase or the writing of the contract.
So that'd be that would be a different motion on this. This is just for the budget amendment. That would be an amendment to the spend plan.
I think it would be, this is part of our budget ordinance.
This is the appropriation of the funds.
The amendment, certainly, this is, yes, I mean, this is part of the.
Which
the
defines
budget.
language on the way that we spend things.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would move to have every expense to be qualified to the council and approved prior to purchase or the writing of said contract.
Can you say it one more time?
Move to have every expense within the ARPA fund to be qualified to the council and approved prior to purchase or the writing of a contract.
Mr. Chairman, clarification. So right now, everything over $10,000 we do goes through purchasing, we have to approve.
Yes.
So your amendment would be saying anything $1 and up, we would need to have a line item and approval from the council before it's spent.
Yeah, a qualification. So per the ARPA requirements, we have to qualify these expenses.
Right.
And this council is responsible for ensuring that they meet the qualifications.
Oh, that's
So-
fine, because there's no line item under $10,000, so you're gonna do it anyway.
I'd second that amendment.
Clarification one more time. Councilman Dodd had asked, I want to just for the record, it's public and health safety, it's, economic recovery, impacted communities, infrastructure, and operational support. So mainly, everything in our items right now are the police, our information system here, technology. So I just want to make sure that that's kind of brought into the clarification that we do have these 5 categories, and it wasn't really stated for you earlier what those categories are.
Yes, I mean, I did attend a meeting in Nashville, and they talked about the 5 categories, how we could use the money. And based on these, it was explaining to us in the meeting that, everything have to be, if it's not qualified and spent the correct way, the money has to be paid back. And it was explained to the point where, and they broke it down what the money could be used at within the categories, so the money could be spent correctly. And so the whole community as a whole would be able to, get the necessary needs in their community. Like the public health, that would be whole citywide, so everybody in the city would benefit from that. I think it's different projects in each, in our districts that we can, look at and see that will be beneficial for our districts, that will be beneficial for all of us. But I think with the way it's set up with the 5 categories, I think we all will be benefiting from the whole process.
I'm gonna be the one that has to interpret whatever it is y'all pass. I don't think it's clear. What I hear, some people might say is that every expenditure would have to come back as a budget amendment for 2 readings. And it would turn, the 9 council members with the notice requirements and all that into the purchasing department. I don't think that's what.
I don't, that's actually not what would happen. So what would happen is if we pass this with the amendment that we have a motion and a second on, the funds would go into these separate categories. Prior to each expense being, we would approve each expense via resolution, or some approval process. So it would be a single reading.
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, and I failed to make this point in my opening comments. So, as I mentioned, this is all going to be in a separate fund. And as I have mentioned, we are restricted to, at this point, from a budget accountability standpoint, to the total, $6,946,725, and we are restricted to these categories that are listed on the budget amendment as far as accountability, right? So any amendment would just be 1 reading, because we would not be increasing the total.
That's right.
We would potentially just be moving money from one category to the other. And one more thing quickly, just as a point of clarification, to Johnny's question. Actually, if you look at the interim rule for the ARPA funds, there are actually 7 categories, right? Not 5. There's actually 7. Those 7 are public health, negative economic impact, service to disproportionately impacted communities, premium pay, infrastructure, revenue replacement, and administrative. Now, under each of those 7 categories, there are, in total, between those 7, something like, 65 is the number that comes to mind, what I call object codes or expense codes, right? So the various projects that have been proposed have been summarized into these 5 categories that are on the budget amendment. But they all fall within these 7 categories in the interim rule, and they've all been assigned tentatively one of the 65 expense codes or object codes that would serve as the justification for the expense. So.
The only time we would have 2 readings is if we increased or decreased one of these categories.
No, the total.
Well, no,
The total amount.
Total amount.
The total amount, yeah. So we could, what I would imagine is that, public health and safety, the IT stuff, we need to get in place quickly. We have a single reading of those along with their justifications brought to the council. We can review those justifications and make the decision whether or not they qualify. We feel like they qualify, and we're ready to take the risk on moving forward with that expense.
Let me just make this observation. We've got 2 items that have public notice. They're both budget amendments. What you're saying and asking this council to adopt has no public notice, is not in writing. And I can't tell you how many times I've been to mediations, we shake hands on a deal, and then we start swapping paper, and they disagree what was agreed to. This feels a little bit like that. We've got several meetings coming up. I would strongly suggest that we consider putting what you want on paper, giving the 9 people on the 8 that are here time to consider it. Let me look at it and consider it before we take what I consider hasty action without public notice and without time to deliberate. I'm not opposed to what you're saying because I'm not sure I understand it, but it sounds more like a policy for budget policy should be done by a resolution as opposed to a budget amendment, which if we change would require, in my opinion, and again, I haven't had time to think about it fully, but in my opinion, what you're proposing is a budget amendment. That's all that's on the agenda. And a budget amendment would have to be done by ordinance.
No, not to, and I'm certainly not an attorney, and not to make it even more complicated, but somewhat in support of what Liz is saying. It's my understanding when the council approves the annual budget ordinance itself each year, it speaks to the amendment process, right? And I think without the opportunity to look at it further, if you start to change the approval process that's already in place, I think that changes the budget ordinance itself, and the only way you can change an ordinance is by ordinance, and ordinances require 2 readings, so.
So we have amended ordinances on the second reading, this council has.
On 2 readings, that's correct.
Right, we've amended them upon the second reading. So this isn't uncharted waters for us. I'm trying to establish a way where we can make sure that we're covering our bases and we're being, so do we need to table this and then come, is that what you're saying, Lewis?
I'm saying I've had 5 minutes to think about it, and I don't think I know.
You're in my seat now. I get that a lot.
Yeah, well, what I'm suggesting is, I would suggest dealing with the things that are on the agenda, however y'all want to deal with. I don't have a recommendation on that.
That's what we're trying to do.
But something that appears to be more of a policy decision. For example, notice how long do you have the written contracts to have to study and things like that. Those are things that are not really budget items. Those are policy items. Those are procedural items. Those are different. I don't know what happens. I don't have any knowledge of what happens if this isn't passed today. I don't know if anything bad happens or not. I don't know. But
I'm not asking us to not pass this. I'm asking us to qualify each item prior to purchase.
when you said table it, that would be not passing it today. I don't know if that creates any problems or not. So I don't know. What I'm telling you is, what is it Rumsfeld said? The unknown unknowns are out there. I don't know what's out there.
Like Reagan said, trust and verify. That's what I want to do.
Well, he said it in Russian, but,
Right.
but anyway.
I just want to verify each of these things.
And I'm
And
not arguing.
that's our sole responsibility as it comes to this plan.
I'm not arguing with you about that. I don't have a vote on that. I don't have a policy position on that. What I'm telling you is I'm going to be required to interpret what you're doing today. I'm not sure what your proposal does. It may just be a little pebble in the water and goes away, or it may create ripples that affect things haven't even thought about because I don't know about them. I don't know about that, the budget issue. That's all I'm saying. I don't think what you're asking for would change if it was brought up at the next council meeting, or we've got several council meetings. That's all I'm saying, is I feel real uncomfortable taking what you said, converting it into a written ordinance or a written budget amendment. I just don't know.
Let me ask
I'd
a quick
like some-
question. Based on what he's asking for, we already have it in place, like what Ms. Wallace was asking, in a sense. It's already in place before, because anything we do over $10,000 come before the council.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that's under $10,000.
So basically what Councilman Paul is asking for, we already is doing basically what he wants us to do. Because we already, anything that come before us, we have to approve it anyway.
I'm just saying, before we get down the road, so a lot of times we're way down the road when we find out about something.
Okay.
Right, we're way down the road. We're at the end of the road when we find out about something. So what I'm saying is, let's involve us in the process. Let's give us the opportunity to review these qualified projects prior to a contract being written and all that. We can say, yes, we want to proceed with this street paving. Go ahead and execute a contract on this. We feel like this qualifies under this funding. That's all I'm asking, to add that step in, so that we're accountable for the taxpayers' dollars. I mean, ultimately, we're accountable for all this. If we get it wrong, we're paying it back, or the next council's paying it back.
So let's do this. If let's withdraw the amendment, and we can just, if the council doesn't disagree, we can add an item, call it new business right now, then you can make a motion or new business for a resolution to do that. So it's not on the budget amendment to create confusion, but it's a resolution to do that.
That would be, I think that would qualify.
Okay,
So
so,
would we take that up now, or would we take that up after the approval of this? I'd prefer to take that up prior. I know we're already on this.
there's already been a motion and a second on it.
Right. A motion and a second to amend. There hasn't been a motion or a second to approve.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that, that's fine. We can, so if you withdraw
So
that. So withdraw
I'll
the.
make two motions.
Or you change the motion. How about you do, because that's not the item, you change the motion not attach it to the budget amendment, but just as a resolution piece. That makes sense?
Yeah, so, yeah,
Mr.
yes.
Chairman, no.
Go ahead.
I'm confused. What we're trying to do right now, Bobby, can you just state and clarify one statement what we are doing today? We are just going on the second reading for,
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, the spend plan resolution was actually approved on Tuesday. So this budget amendment is the appropriation amendment. So this appropriates $6.9 million to these various categories that were approved in this spend plan resolution. So that's what you're doing today. Now, as has been described by Councilman Dodd, and I said in my opening statements, the normal approval process as it relates to contracts, accepting bids, et cetera, would apply to these and would come to the council as they normally do.
so we are approving what we approved on Tuesday. These categories, you have taken them from 7 to 5 to get them in better order or where it was most needed. So we have an estimate in our packet of where all this money is going. So I want clarification, and I understand what Councilman Taylor is saying, but I'm also thinking, is this what our attorney was saying? Does this need to come up in the Finance Committee, in the policy, where it actually changes how we do everything? Is that what you were asking? Where it would change everything?
I think you could expect a potential resolution in the future that would look at the city's processes as a whole. But right now, what I'm talking about is specific to the American Rescue Plan Act.
Okay, and do we need
And
to
so
change
what I'm
the
thinking
resolution?
is a resolution, is to amend the resolution, Mayor, that we passed at the last meeting, to add to add what I had motioned and seconded for the budget amendment, if you feel that's appropriate.
Can we amend the resolution? Once the resolution was already passed, add an amendment to it?
Yeah, it's a preliminary, that's.
Right, yeah.
It's not on the public notice. Now, you're asking me to curb it on the fly, obviously, you can amend the resolution.
Without notifying the public that's an agenda item.
Today,
Well, was the public notified that a proposed budget amendment of industrial land acquisition, that wasn't involved in the public notice?
Yeah, the public notice of the meeting, the agenda was published after that.
again, you're asking me questions that I'm not sure I understand all the important facts. I'm not trying to avoid answering, I'll answer it, but right now, dropping things in the middle of a council session creates potential problems. May not create any problem.
I agree. I mean, but this is,
I think that's your whole point.
yeah, that's my point, is that, we added an agenda item onto this agenda yesterday. We've done that. We've modified things at the 11th hour. I'm just trying to get us where we're abreast of the situation and where we understand what's going on.
And I want to help you get there. If we don't do it the right way, you may not. Here's what I'm saying. I've dealt with this. The notice is a general, here's what we're gonna be talking about, kind of like the caption of a bill in the state legislature. What you do under that caption has got to be related to the caption. What
Sure.
we do, it's related to the notice that the public has to be here and whatever. What you're doing, I'm not sure what you're doing.
I think it's in
I
the
know.
spirit of the American Rescue Plan Act funds.
And you may be right.
Yeah.
But if challenged, we'll have the judge tell us whether you're right or not. And
Okay.
I'm just saying-
Chairman, when do we anticipate the next special call meeting to be for some of the other items?
The only other one would be the land acquisition piece would be, once they nail down the closing date, maybe Tuesday.
So, I mean, if we tabled this for now, gave public notice for the amendment to, between now and Tuesday, I know we have immediate needs, but I didn't see too much of a delay.
I don't know the answer to that.
When you said table, what are y'all actually table? The whole process or just that?
That's what, I don't know if we can table it, if
Yeah, we,
it's done Tuesday.
Can we just make a vote on this and then,
Yes, we have a motion and a second on the floor.
to
Currently.
amend the budget ordinance.
Yes, to amend the budget ordinance.
But if there's concern over getting this right in public notice, then that allows that.
Well, here's what I've heard. I hadn't been taking notes. Is you want to amend the budget so that every contract is approved by council.
I'm saying that's what the charter says. The charter, I've got two arguments. I'm going to get back to the American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan, what I'm asking is that each and every expense is qualified to the council first and approved prior to purchase or the creation or making of a contract.
And I'm not speaking for Mr. Taylor, but I think I'm trying to understand, he's concerned that we will be held accountable later if we get one of these buckets or something in the wrong area.
Not buckets,
But the
specific
specific
expenses.
Correct. But right now, we have the plan correct, but you're just concerned later when they come back and say.
I'm just saying, when we approve this, there are only certain items that would qualify for them, for the administration to bring back to us. And those would be contracted items. Right? Other items that aren't contracted would not come back for our approval. And I'm trying to establish a process where we would have to review those, the qualifications and narratives that are associated with those, and resolve to move forward with those specific expenses.
Mr. Chairman, point of clarification, what are some of these items that would slip by us, for lack of a better term? I'm trying to follow this here.
No one knows.
I can share with you, unless the mayor would like.
No, you have the list.
Because I scanned through it a minute ago, we have approximately 20% that falls under 10,000, but I'm having difficulty understanding what's being insinuated as, something that could fly off our radar. What exactly, what are some examples?
Yeah, let me share with you. So, in this fiscal year, there's some question as to investment in parks being required in certain qualified census tracts. Okay, so we have, I believe, 7 qualified census tracts within the city. The majority of those are located in downtown and East Jackson. The proposed spend in those parks, there's only one proposed spend within the qualified census tracts currently. So my question remains is, for example, the only one is the playground equipment at Centennial. Everything else is outside of that zone. And so the question is that qualified? And I don't think we can answer that. Mr. Arnold and I have gone back and forth on that.
Just as a point of clarification, and these discussions have taken place in the committee that's been working on all of these. So a particular project can be qualified just by the fact that it's in a certain census tract. The playground equipment at Centennial Park, as you described, that in and of itself qualifies that particular project. Similar projects like that, without speaking specifically to any one project, that might not qualify otherwise because it's in a census tract or it's specifically spelled out, in the interim rules. What's required is, to use the interim rule buzzword, it's the nexus or the connection between the COVID pandemic and the damage or negative impact and the investment of the ARPA funds, how that positively impacts that situation. So that's how specific projects are qualified. So, not speaking for Councilman Taylor, but I think what he's saying is he's identified certain projects, maybe in Parks and Recreation, other than the one he mentioned, which is in a census tract, that he may have questions about whether that's going to qualify at this point. I think, is that, not to put words in your mouth?
Yeah, yes, and, we are responsible for qualifying these. And so what I'm saying is, it may be that these other Parks and Rec, projects are qualifying, but we need to review the narrative and the qualifications prior to approving them. If we approve them in whole, then we don't, we're approving all this saying, hey, we think all this is gonna qualify, and there just hadn't been a lot, in the sheet that I have, a lot of these narratives haven't been brought back to us yet. And so the city's still working on collecting all the narratives and the qualifications. So we need to review each of those as we work through it.
So is that something, Mayor, the Budget Committee could take a look at?
Yeah, Budget Committee can take a look at. We plan to give all the narratives to council prior to anything we do. As been stated.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that's, my concern is I understand what we're trying to accomplish here with the amended motion, because absolutely, the process needs to be held accountable. That's what we're all here to do. However, per Mr. Cobb's comments, I do fear some unintended consequences, maybe encumbering the process unnecessarily. And yes, it's perhaps we can call it the fear of the unknown, but just trying to, is this necessary, is this not? I'm a little tangled here.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry, just in the spirit of transparency for the council and also for the public and just clarity moving forward. There's been a lot of discussion about qualification of projects and so forth. But just to be clear, the category operational support, lost revenue, the projects that are categorized there that roll up to this $1,124,749. Under the interim rules or ARPA rules, there is no qualification or justification required for those. None, zero. So just council approval. So.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Wallace, let Councilman Wallace, and then we'll come back.
Okay, under the Park and Recs, there is one under 10,000, and I'm just kind of trying to just be as straightforward with my question as possible. New roof for Pavilion at Bemis, $7,800. When there was a committee, and I know Mr. Taylor helped on this, when there was a committee, you all did the best that you could, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, the best that you could to determine what the act was telling us how to categorize this. So right Tuesday, we passed to do it. How can we move forward but look at items when it does come up? Because right now, we're not buying it, correct? We're not moving, we're passing to try to move this.
Correct.
But we have to have the experts, Bobby and Ms. Kirk, to interpret this, and you on the committee. When it comes back, and then they'll say, a new roof, how did COVID impact, why are you spending it on that? Is that going to come back to us, or are you all gonna be able to interpret that, and then we won't be held accountable? Does that question
Anything outside of that that requires justification will be brought to you prior to the purchase or the contract of that. And that's what we have mentioned before, to let you all know what the narrative is going to be created for each item.
So what,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, what you're saying is you plan to do what I have motioned and we have a second on?
Yes.
Okay, so there shouldn't really be any issue then.
Now, I think the question right now is the process of the motion. Has been the question on the amendment of the budget amendment. I think that's been the question. Mr. Cobb, you had something?
Well, I'm just looking at section 20 of the charter, and it's a little bit broader. For example, the council may by ordinance or resolution assign to a head of a department, superintendent, officer, agent, or employee duties in respect to the business of any other department or employment, and such service shall be rendered without additional compensation. It also says the head of every department shall from time to time, as required by law or when requested, report to the mayor in writing the transactions. So there is this section that has a process for giving authority, delegation of authority. For example, it says, council shall make or authorize the making of all contracts.
Correct.
And no contract shall bind or be obligatory upon the city unless either made by ordinance or resolution adopted by council or reduced to writing and approved. So there's a little more flexibility, and that's what I was checking on. But what I hear you saying is a process request. And I don't have a
In a
problem.
broader sense, as far as all city business is concerned, that's what I've been advocating for. That's why I'm trying to get the work session set up where we can be abreast of what's going on within the city. Specific to the ARPA funds, I'm trying to ensure that we can qualify all of these projects. Ultimately, the council's held responsible for the qualification of those. I don't want to just say, yeah, these broad categories, let's go spend it. And then in 26, 27, where the federal government's coming back and clawing
Let me
back.
ask you a question. Let's suppose that the issue was putting a swing set in a park outside the census district. Is your motion that swing set would have to come before council for approval?
Each individual project, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so it could come as a collection. It could say, hey, this month, we want to review, or this meeting, we want to review these 20 items. Here's the justification, here's the qualification, here's the expense. We'd like to move forward with these. We can resolve to move forward with those, and the existing city processes can move forward within purchasing.
Let me make a recommendation on this. Adding all other 8 council members to the current committee that is going through this process. That way, when we have these meetings, every council member can be a part of the process. It would be an open meeting for public, everyone to come through. There wouldn't be an official vote, but there would be a consensus made. And that way, we don't have to wait for monthly meetings to do that. We can, because we've, at one point, this group was meeting weekly. So we invite all the council members, public, media, to the weekly meetings as we get to those spend plans, as we get to the amendment. If we have to make the amendment to the spend plan outside of what we've justified and verified, then that can come to council as we made motion on the amendment of the spend plan. But in the spirit of not waiting, allow the council and the committee to come to a consensus on the individual items.
I think that could be a part of the process. Ultimately, I think we need to approve each individually. But I would welcome all of us being a part of the process. The question remains, do we need to, I feel like this is an applicable amendment and a qualified amendment to the budget ordinance.
Okay.
If we need to table this until Tuesday's meeting, which I'm anticipating, we'll have another meeting on Tuesday. If we need to table this for me to draft, along with Mr. Cobb, a resolution, or in whatever format, then I'd entertain that as well. Or if we just wanted to pause for a moment for us to do that, I can do that too. I just want to make sure that we're we are ultimately responsible for this, and we need to have processes and
I think it's also
and
important,
controls.
what do the other 7 council members want to do?
Are you asking us to speak?
Yeah, I'm asking, but if we have a motion and a second on the table, I'm asking, do you all want to vote on the motion in a second? Do you all want to ask Councilman Taylor to remove that and table this to Tuesday? What does the rest of the council want to do?
If we're just speaking, I feel like we're looking at, as what Mr. Cobb said earlier, this is a procedural, that it kind of needs to be adopted into our budget process, how we do everything. I'm hoping, and what I think that I should understand and trust Mr. Arnold and Ms. Kirk, that and yourself have worked diligently, that we do have this in place, it's proper, but we're not going to spend the money until we hear back to make sure that we're in the correct census or line items. Is that correct or not?
Well, we'll have the narrative, that's why I talked about having the council involved in the committee meeting to come to a consensus on if we are confident in the presentation, and our staff has been working on that, well tying the nexus back to the COVID usage.
Mr. Chairman, point of clarification. Prior to the amendment, we were essentially voting on, or we were to vote upon the allocations of the funds, and if the categories were to shift, to change in any ways, those would require an additional amendment.
Yes. And any amendment to the spend plan would require an amendment and approval of the council.
Okay, so with all due respect to the duty of monitoring the spends, would that be more suitable in the form of a resolution? Do we have any opinion on that?
What I understood Mr. Taylor saying goes more to the process of actually expending the money. And that's covered, at least in part, by the competitive bidding laws and ordinances. And then there are processes or policies that the city can adopt on how it does its business. And that's what, as I hear it, that's what I think he's asking for, is a process. I'd like to see the contracts earlier, right? And things like that. Those aren't budget amendments, those are process issues. He knows a lot more about that process than I do. But as I hear the description of what he wants, if he wants to vote on every swing set at the park outside a census district, that is a process issue, not a budget amendment issue. That's how I'm processing his comments. But I haven't had a chance to talk to him about this at all, or Mr. Arnold at all, or any of you at all. But I'm being asked to rule on it, and I have concerns about walking into that on an oral amendment to a $7 million budget document.
Yeah, I'd agree. I
I
mean,
think that's the heart of it.
yeah, I think that's, we haven't had a chance to discuss it at all either.
But what I have heard is that these are funds that are sitting in our bank, and we've got limitations on what they can do, and we're now setting limitations in 5 areas. And you're saying, I think I hear everybody saying, those are fine. But
Yeah.
then how it drops out of each area.
That's right.
You want to have approval, and maybe each area goes in like this part, that part, and then you want to drop down to each.
For the American for the American Rescue Plan, there needs to be an additional layer of this.
Maybe. And is this something that's specific to that, or is that something that is global? I don't know the answer. I hear the questions. I hear all the questions. I don't have any of the answers right now, or I don't feel comfortable giving opinions about answers right now. So I think it
Mr.
would be
I think that's the
appropriate to
spirit
pass,
of the-
it would be appropriate to approve what is being requested here and work on the process issue later and separately. But it doesn't have to be. You could delay it, but I don't know what the cost of delaying it is in terms of things outside my experience or expertise.
I'd prefer not to delay it. I mean, I know that we have these needs that need to get funded. I mean, I just think we need the process in place
Mr.
to be able to
Chairman,
qualify them.
can we, I think Ms. Kirk might have something to add. She's been working on this. I'd like to hear from somebody that was on the committee and that's been studying this. Thank you.
frankly, I think we're making, I don't know. Y'all approved large buckets that things could be moved around in. You didn't approve line items. That's the question on the table, is approving line items. So I would agree with Attorney Cobb that that's a process issue that's got to be worked on. If this is delayed, cost is going to increase for items that we need. Turnout gears for our fire department, server stuff for police to make sure that we're backing up all of our files so we aren't subject to a lawsuit. So, we are going to be transparent. We're going to give you every justification form. I can confidently say I'm not an expert in it. Nobody is, but we'll have a process. So I don't know if that helps or not, but just know what you approved previously was buckets, wasn't line items.
Do we feel like the amendment slows down that process? Because I think as we've discussed this, and even Mayor Connor, it sounds like we're sort of saying the same thing, that we're going to do this. I think the amendment just clarifies it.
Just puts it in writing.
Puts it in writing, especially in kind of the history we've all experienced of things coming at the last minute or not having time for the council that is responsible to make a decision on it.
I don't know if you're asking me that, but personally, it just continues to move it forward, so I don't know why take it up for a vote.
Ms. Kirk, can you speak louder?
I don't see how that would delay anything. I think you can move
Yeah,
forward.
I
on
could be
voting.
wrong, but I don't see how the amendment delays it if you're going to be bringing that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It really, I do think we may be making this, not that you're not raised an important question, but the resolution of the question might not be as complicated as the road we're going down possibly. And the question about, do you put something in writing, that's a fair question, and how do you do that? So again, not to be redundant, but you've previously approved the spend plan and the
Preliminary.
5 categories or
Yes, sir.
buckets of money. The budget amendment just meets the technical requirements of the state for the council to appropriate these funds to those 5 categories. I think we're all in agreement that purchase order, bid requirements, contract requirements, et cetera, all are going to be applicable to this process, just like every other process is. Where we seem to be stuck is, as Lauren and I have said, the mayor has said, there will be we've got the state-approved template that we're completing on every single project, right? Included on that is what category and what's expense code and the interim rules we believe this qualifies under, and whatever narrative justification or data-driven justification to support that. So we're already committed to that. We're already doing that. So where the question really seems to be is what is the approval process for that compliance form, that justification form? Is there a step that takes place, I guess, prior to our normal budget committee, agenda meetings, council meetings, or not? And if so, who's involved, in that process? I mean, I'm confident, I know the group that's been working on this because we've had discussions. We intend to be compliant. And it's been said several times, to the best of our ability, we're going to make sure anything we submit is already compliant. I mean, that's the goal. And that's, we've questioned things internally, ourselves. And I've tried to describe for you, there are certain projects that by definition, particularly in the infrastructure area, right, that it's a lot clearer, right? And I mentioned that the operational support lost revenue, there's no justification required. The census tract, there's certain ways to qualify certain projects kind of automatically. And the qualification hurdle for the others is the connection to COVID and the impact on the negative results from the pandemic. And that's where the narrative and the data that we insert would drive that. So we're doing all of that already. The point on the floor just seems to be, you know, what is going to be the approval process before we bring something to the council, and all of the existing approvals related to contracts and bids and everything, you know, before we ever get to that point. That seems to be what I'm hearing to be the point. So I don't know if that helps or not.
We have a meeting with our department heads tomorrow to discuss this, and Mayor can correct me if I'm wrong, but I want all of our department heads that have things in this budget to understand there's a justification form. If it cannot be completed, then we'll need to look at reallocating that. But this was based on our capital plan that y'all approved. Most of this was based on the capital plan y'all approved previously in the budget process. So just like we brought up stormwater, that's going to change. Things are going to change.
And again, you know, this is a good discussion. I don't want to prolong it any longer than necessary, nor do I want to make it more complicated than it has to be. However, I think it's pertinent to realize, if you think through this, there's been a lot of discussion about qualifying the project, right? So there are rules that we have to go by, but that's, you know, qualifying the project is, or can be, a separate question from, I disapprove of this project compared to another project. To me, that's a different process.
Sure.
So I'm, you know, you know, we hope not to propose a project to you that we're not very confident is already qualified before you ever look at it. I mean, that's our goal, that's our plan. So that's a different process than, well, that's a good project, but I like this other project better. So and I'm a little unclear on what.
Yeah, it's all about qualification. I mean, ultimately, you know, I think we have to qualify. You know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but, you know, I don't think holistically we can look at this list and say these all qualify.
Well, that's the reason we're going through the process right now of
Right.
completing the templates and
Right,
the
but-
narrative and the data, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mayor, I would like to make a motion to,
We already have a motion and a second on the floor. I was trying to think of the best way to compromise and get everything we all.
yeah, because I think we're going to look at how we could put that in place.
So let's, if the council can decide whether to pass or not pass this, but here's a recommendation that I have for council to contemplate. That in our Tuesday meeting, that we can bring the spend plan, the preliminary resolution back amended with that provision that the justification, we can figure the wording out, the justifications are approved by council prior to spend.
Yes.
Is that your motion?
No, I don't make
No,
motions.
he's not making, he's trying.
I'm just kidding.
And Mayor, I appreciate your willingness to look into this and your assistance in navigating this. If we can have an amendment to the resolution, the preliminary resolution, where we require those justifications.
Prior to. Yeah.
Within the categories that require those justifications.
Yeah.
I want to be very clear on that. If we can have that at Tuesday's meeting, I would be willing to withdraw my motion. That way,
Okay.
everybody's on the same page legally, you know.
We'll work on that amendment today and get that out to council this afternoon, and have it on the agenda for Tuesday under new business.
If I can get nods from the council that we're kind of in agreement on that,
Yeah,
then.
I just want to reassure you, Mr. Taylor, that the meeting that I went to on the state level, they're watching this money real close.
Yeah.
And they want to make sure that this money is going to be spent the way it needs to be spent and through the whole community, not just taking it and go do what you want to do with it. They're watching this money real close to make sure that we're going to do, you know, so the whole community will be able to benefit from this money.
I agree.
And they're watching it real close, trust me.
Yeah.
And I think if the community can feel better that we're being as transparent as possible, then I think we've done the wise thing.
And Ms. Kirk, with the meeting tomorrow, department heads, you can still keep that on track so we don't delay. And I think that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lauren and Brian and Stacy Stoner in risk management and Bobby are all working with the department heads that don't necessarily deal in this arena on the justification of the items in the other buckets outside of lost revenue. So we'll work on that resolution, get that to council this afternoon for Tuesday's meeting, the amendment to the resolution, and then we'll continue with the department heads to work on them on their justifications and their items, and that way we can amend as we go forward and know that this is a working document as we go forward and amend it, and have the approval process in place as well.
Yeah, a process to finalize.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. With that commitment, I will withdraw my motion to amend the budget ordinance amendment.
All right, now is there a motion for item 2, the proposed budget
So
amendment?
moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? No? All right. Council, please vote.
David, okay. Motion passed 8-0.
All right, no
Thank
further
you.
business coming before the council. Meeting is adjourned.
Don't forget beer board, guys.
That's what I'm